Late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn of Grant Holloway's suburban Austin home. Grant pulled into the driveway, his fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on the steering wheel. He glanced at his watch, 5:30 p.m., earlier than usual, but not so early as to raise suspicion. As he stepped out of his car, the weight of the day's work seemed to lift from his shoulders. Here, in this quiet neighborhood, was his sanctuary. His gaze swept over the two-story house, pride swelling in his chest. Every brick, every carefully tended flower bed, represented years of hard work and dedication. Grant strode up the walkway, briefcase in hand. He'd barely reached for the doorknob when a muffled voice from inside made him pause. Janelle's voice, hushed but unmistakable. Strange. She rarely used that tone, controlled, almost cold. "Once he's done paying for your private school, I'm filing for divorce." Grant froze, his hand hovering inches from the door. Surely he'd misheard. Janelle continued, each word a dagger to Grant's heart. "I'll accuse him of domestic abuse, ruin his reputation, and then we'll live off his money with your real dad, Owen. You won't see it coming?" The world tilted on its axis. Grant's vision blurred, his breath caught in his throat. Real dad? Owen? The name swirled in his mind, a toxic cocktail of betrayal and disbelief. Then came Mara's voice, his 17-year-old daughter. Or was she? Sounding rehearsed, almost bored. "And then we'll make sure he never bothers us again, right?" Grant stumbled back, nearly tripping over the welcome mat. The irony wasn't lost on him. Welcome indeed. He steadied himself against the porch railing, knuckles white, struggling to process what he'd just heard. Memories flashed through his mind in rapid succession. Late nights at the office, sacrificing weekends, all to provide for his family. To give Mara the opportunities he never had. The expensive private school tuition that strained their budget, but seemed worth every penny for his little girl's future. His little girl. The thought twisted in his gut like a knife. Grant's mind raced, piecing together 1,000 little moments that suddenly made horrifying sense. Janelle's increased absences, her vague explanations, the subtle distance that had grown between them. He'd attributed it to the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage, never suspecting the rot that festered beneath the surface. And Mara, sweet, ambitious Mara, who he'd thought hung the moon. How long had she known? How long had she been complicit in this charade? The urge to burst through the door, to confront them, to demand answers, nearly overwhelmed him. But years of discipline, of carefully considering every angle before making a move, held him back. No, they couldn't know he was onto them. Not yet. With trembling hands, Grant retrieved his keys and quietly unlocked the door. He took a deep breath, forcing his features into a mask of normalcy, and stepped inside. "I'm home," he called out, his voice betraying none of the turmoil raging within. Janelle appeared in the hallway, all smiles and warm welcome. "Hey, honey, you're early today." Grant studied her face, searching for any sign of the coldness he'd heard moments ago. There was none. She was the picture of a loving wife, her act so flawless it made his stomach churn. "Yeah, wrapped up the Johnson project ahead of schedule," he replied, the lie coming easily. "Where's Mara?" "Oh, she's upstairs studying. You know how focused she gets before exams." Grant nodded, fighting the urge to call out her lie. Instead, he forced a smile. "That's my girl, always working hard." Janelle moved closer, placing a hand on his arm. "You must be tired. Why don't you relax while I finish up dinner?" "Sounds great," Grant managed, resisting the impulse to flinch away from her touch. "I'll just go freshen up." As he climbed the stairs, each step felt like lead. He paused outside Mara's room, hand poised to knock. What would he see if he opened that door? His devoted daughter diligently studying, or a stranger plotting his downfall? In the end, he couldn't bring himself to knock. The facade had to remain intact, at least for now. Grant retreated to the master bedroom, locking the door behind him. Only then did he allow himself to crumble. He sank onto the bed, head in his hands, as silent sobs racked his body. Everything he'd believed in, everything he'd worked for, was built on quicksand. But as the initial shock subsided, a different emotion began to take hold. Anger. Cold, calculated anger that pushed aside the pain and sharpened his focus. Grant stood, wiping his eyes. He wouldn't be their victim. He wouldn't let them destroy everything he'd built. No, he would beat them at their own game. With renewed purpose, Grant booted up his laptop. First order of business, protecting his assets. He accessed their joint accounts, transferring funds to a new account solely in his name. It wasn't about the money. It was about cutting off their means to hurt him further. Next, he pulled up Mara's school records. His jaw clenched as he looked at the tuition costs, each payment a reminder of his misplaced trust. With a few clicks, he canceled all future payments. Let them scramble to explain that. As he worked, Grant's mind raced ahead, formulating plans within plans. He needed evidence, concrete proof of their betrayal, and he needed to find out more about this Owen character. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Grant?" Janelle called. "Dinner's ready, honey?" Grant closed his laptop, straightening his clothes. "Be right there," he replied, impressed by how steady his voice sounded. Dinner was an exercise in self-control. Grant watched Janelle and Mara, searching for cracks in their performance. They chatted about school, about weekend plans, as if they hadn't been plotting his downfall mere hours ago. "So Mara," Grant said, keeping his tone casual, "how are those college applications coming along?" Mara's eyes lit up, her smile so genuine it almost made Grant doubt what he'd heard. "Almost. Great, Dad. I'm really hoping to get into UT Austin's engineering program. Following in your footsteps, you know?" The words, once a source of pride, now felt like acid in Grant's ears. He forced a smile. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. You know I'll always support your dreams." Janelle reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "We're so lucky to have you, Grant. Aren't we, Mara?" Mara nodded enthusiastically. "The best dad ever." Grant felt bile rise in his throat, but managed to maintain his composure. "I'm the lucky one," he said, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. As the days passed, Grant threw himself into his covert mission with the same dedication he'd once given his family. He installed hidden cameras in the house, recording Janelle's comings and goings. He hired a discreet IT specialist to recover deleted texts and emails from her devices. Each new piece of evidence was another blow, another confirmation of the depth of their betrayal. He learned that Owen was a financial consultant with a reputation for charm and questionable ethics. Grant dug deeper, uncovering a trail of failed ventures and disgruntled investors. One evening, about a week after overhearing the conversation, Grant found himself alone in the house. Janelle was at a book club meeting. He now knew better, and Mara was at a study group. He sat in his home office, surrounded by printouts and digital records of their deceit. Texts between Janelle and Owen, full of passionate declarations and cruel jokes at Grant's expense. Bank statements showing unexplained withdrawals. A paternity test he'd secretly had done, confirming his worst fears about Mara. The pain was still there, a constant ache in his chest, but it was overshadowed by a grim determination. He would not be their victim. He would not let them destroy the life he'd worked so hard to build. Grant's phone buzzed a text from Janelle. "Running late. Don't wait up." He stared at the message, at the casual heart emoji tacked on like an afterthought. How many times had he received messages like this, never suspecting the truth behind them? In that moment, Grant made his decision. He couldn't stay in this house, surrounded by lies, playing the role of the oblivious husband and father. It was time to disappear. Working quickly, Grant packed a bag with essentials: clothes, toiletries, important documents. He transferred more funds to his private account, leaving just enough in the joint account to avoid immediate suspicion. As he moved through the house, gathering what he needed, Grant's eyes fell on the family photos adorning the walls. Smiling faces captured in happier times, or so he'd thought. Now, each image felt like a mockery. He paused by a recent photo of Mara at her school science fair. She beamed at the camera, proudly displaying her first-place ribbon. Grant's heart clenched. Despite everything, a part of him still loved her, still saw her as his little girl. But he couldn't let that love blind him anymore. Mara had made her choice. She wasn't the victim here. She was an accomplice. Grant removed the photo from its frame, tucking it into his bag, a reminder of what he'd lost and why he couldn't look back. Finally, he sat down at the kitchen table and penned a short note. "Janelle and Mara, I know the truth. All of it. I won't be the pawn in your game any longer. Don't try to find me. Don't try to contact me. It's over." Grant, he left the note on the table, where they couldn't miss it. Then, with one last look around the home that had once been his sanctuary, Grant Holloway walked out into the night. As he drove away, watching the house recede in his rearview mirror, Grant felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Grief for the life he was leaving behind, anger at the betrayal that had driven him to this point, but also a sense of liberation. For the first time in years, his future was entirely his own. Grant's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he merged onto the highway. He didn't know exactly where he was going, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning. Janelle and Mara thought they had won. They thought they could use him and discard him at their convenience. But they had underestimated him. Grant allowed himself a grim smile as he accelerated, leaving Austin and his old life behind. They wanted to ruin him? Fine. But he would be the architect of his own destiny. And when the time was right, when he had rebuilt himself into something stronger, more formidable than they could imagine, he would return. And then they would learn the true meaning of vengeance. The San Antonio skyline loomed before Grant as he navigated the morning traffic. 5 years had passed since that fateful night when he'd left his old life behind, but the memory still burned fresh in his mind. He'd traded the familiar streets of Austin for this new urban landscape, determined to rebuild himself from the ground up. Grant pulled into the parking lot of Horizon Engineering, the firm he now called home. As he stepped out of his car, he straightened his tie and took a deep breath. Today was a big day, a meeting with potential investors that could catapult the company to new heights. "Morning, Mr. Holloway," called out Sarah, his assistant, as he strode through the office. "Your 9 a.m. is already in the conference room." Grant nodded, his face a mask of calm determination. "Thanks, Sarah. Any messages?" "Just one," she replied, handing him a slip of paper. "A woman called, wouldn't leave her name, said it was urgent." For a moment, Grant's composure slipped. Could it be Janelle? Or worse, Mara? He crumpled the note in his fist, forcing the thought away. "Probably just another sales call," he said, his voice level. "I'll deal with it later." The conference room fell silent as Grant entered. 6 pairs of eyes turned to him, a mix of curiosity and anticipation. He recognized most of them local business leaders and potential investors. But one face stood out, a stranger with sharp eyes and an expensive suit. "Gentlemen," Grant began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Thank you for coming. Before we begin, I don't believe I've had the pleasure." He gestured to the stranger. The man stood, extending his hand. "Marcus Reeves, Venture Capital Associates. I hope you don't mind me crashing your party, Mr. Holloway. Your reputation precedes you." Grant shook his hand firmly, studying Reeves' face. There was something familiar about him, but he couldn't quite place it. "Not at all, Mr. Reeves. The more, the merrier." For the next hour, Grant laid out his vision for Horizon Engineering's future. He spoke of innovative designs, of pushing the boundaries of what was possible in structural engineering. With each word, he could see the investors leaning in, their interest peaked. "And that, gentlemen," Grant concluded, "is why Horizon is poised to revolutionize the industry." Any questions? The room erupted in discussion. Grant fielded inquiries with ease, his responses sharp and confident. But throughout it all, he couldn't shake the feeling that Reeves was watching him a little too closely. As the meeting wound down, Reeves approached Grant. "Impressive presentation, Mr. Holloway. I'd love to discuss this further. Perhaps over dinner?" Grant hesitated. Something about Reeves set him on edge. But turning down a potential investor wasn't an option. "Certainly," he replied. "My assistant can set something up." Later that evening, Grant sat across from Reeves in an upscale restaurant. The conversation flowed easily, touching on business strategies and market trends. But as their entrees arrived, Reeves leaned in, his voice lowering. "You know, Grant, may I call you Grant? I did some digging into your background." Grant's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, his eyes never leaving Reeves' face. "Is that so?" Reeves nodded, taking a sip of his wine. "Quite the story. Successful engineer in Austin, picture-perfect family. Then, poof, you vanish, only to resurface here in San Antonio. I fail to see how my personal history is relevant to our business discussion," Grant replied, his tone icy. "Oh, but it is," Reeves countered. "You see, I like to know who I'm dealing with. And a man who can reinvent himself so thoroughly, that's someone worth knowing." Grant's mind raced. How much did Reeves know? And more importantly, what did he want? "Mr. Reeves, if you have a point to make, I suggest you make it." Reeves leaned back, a small smile playing on his lips. "My point, Grant, is that I'm not just interested in investing in your company. I'm interested in investing in you." "Me?" Grant's eyebrows rose. "Yes, you. A man with your experience could be very useful in certain circles. Circles that deal with people who, shall we say, need a fresh start." Understanding dawned on Grant. "You're talking about something illegal." Reeves shrugged. "Illegal, unethical. Such subjective terms. I prefer to think of it as providing opportunities for those who need them most." Grant stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm not interested, Mr. Reeves. And if this is the kind of investment you had in mind, I suggest you look elsewhere. As he turned to leave, Reeves called after him. Think about it, Grant. A man like you, with your particular set of skills, you could go far. Grant didn't look back. He strode out of the restaurant, his mind whirling. He'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let someone like Reeves drag him into the mud. Back in his apartment, Grant poured himself a stiff drink. The encounter with Reeves had shaken him more than he cared to admit. It was a stark reminder that his past was never far behind. He walked to the window, looking out over the San Antonio night. In the reflection, he saw not just himself, but the man he'd become. Harder, colder, successful, yes, but at what cost? A knock at the door startled him from his reverie. Grant tensed. He wasn't expecting anyone, and after the day he'd had, unexpected visitors were the last thing he needed. Cautiously, he approached the door, peering through the peephole. His heart nearly stopped. On the other side stood Mara, older now, but unmistakable. For a long moment, Grant stood frozen, his hand on the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at him to ignore her, to pretend he wasn't home. But a deeper part of him, a part he thought he'd buried long ago, propelled him forward. He opened the door. Mara's eyes widened. "Dad," she breathed, the word hanging between them like a chasm. Grant's face remained impassive. "Mara, how did you find me?" She shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't easy. I've been looking for years. Can I come in?" Against his better judgment, Grant stepped aside, allowing her to enter. He watched as she took in the apartment's sparse, functional, devoid of personal touches. "Nice place," Mara said, her attempt at casual conversation falling flat. "What do you want, Mara?" Grant's voice was cold, controlled. She turned to face him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I need your help, Dad. Mom, she's in trouble. We both are." Grant's laugh was harsh, mirthless. "Of course. You're in trouble, so you come running to dear old Dad. Tell me, Mara, did you think I'd forgotten? That I'd welcome you with open arms?" "No, Mara faltered. "I know what we did was wrong, but you don't understand. Mom, Stop." Grant's voice cut through her excuses like a knife. "I don't want to hear it. Whatever trouble you and your mother have gotten yourselves into, it's not my problem." Mara's face crumpled. "Please, Dad. I know we hurt you, but I was just a kid. I didn't understand. A kid." Grant's control slipped, anger seeping into his voice. "You were 17, Mara. Old enough to know right from wrong. Old enough to be an accomplice in destroying my life. That's not fair." Mara shot back, her own temper flaring. "You have no idea what it was like after you left. Mom fell apart. Owen turned out to be a fraud. We lost everything." Grant's eyes narrowed. "And whose fault is that? You made your choices, Mara. You and your mother. Now you get to live with the consequences." Mara stared at him, shock and hurt warring on her face. "I can't believe this. You're not the man I remember." "You're right," Grant replied, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm not. That man died the night he overheard his wife and daughter plotting to destroy him." A heavy silence fell between them. Mara's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. "So that's it? You won't help us?" Grant moved to the door, opening it. "I think you should leave." Mara walked slowly to the door, pausing on the threshold. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "I'm sorry. For everything." For a moment, Grant's resolve wavered. The hurt in Mara's eyes, so raw and genuine, tugged at something deep inside him. But then he remembered the overheard conversation, the years of deception, the life he'd been forced to abandon. "Goodbye, Mara," he said, closing the door firmly. Alone once more, Grant leaned against the door, his heart pounding. He'd done it. He'd faced Mara and stood his ground. So why did he feel so empty? The next few weeks passed in a blur. Grant threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, as if he could outrun the ghosts of his past through sheer force of will. But Mara's visit had stirred up memories and emotions he'd long tried to suppress. One afternoon, as Grant pored over blueprints in his office, Sarah knocked on his door. "Mr. Holloway? There's a Detective Rodriguez here to see you." Grant's head snapped up. "Detective? Show him in." A moment later, a gray-faced man in a rumpled suit entered. "Mr. Holloway? I'm Detective Rodriguez, San Antonio PD. I'm afraid I have some bad news." Grant's mind raced. Had something happened to Mara? To Janelle? Despite everything, the thought sent a jolt of fear through him. "What is it, Detective?" he asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. Rodriguez sighed. It's about your ex-wife, Janelle Holloway. I'm sorry to inform you that she was found dead in her Austin apartment this morning. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Grant gripped the edge of his desk, steadying himself. Dead? How? Initial reports suggest an overdose, but we're treating it as suspicious. Mr. Holloway, when was the last time you had contact with your ex-wife? Grant's mind whirled. Should he mention Mara's visit? No, that would only complicate things. Not since I left Austin 5 years ago, he said finally. We didn't part on good terms? Rodriguez nodded, jotting something in his notebook. And your daughter, Mara? Have you had any contact with her? Grant hesitated. No, he lied, the word tasting bitter on his tongue. Not for years. The detective studied him for a long moment. I see. Well, Mr. Holloway, if you think of anything that might be relevant to our investigation, please don't hesitate to contact me. He handed Grant his card. After Rodriguez left, Grant sat at his desk, staring blankly at the wall. Janelle was dead. The woman he'd once loved, who had betrayed him so completely gone. He should feel something, shouldn't he? Grief? Anger? Relief? But all he felt was a hollow emptiness. As the day wore on, Grant found himself unable to focus. The blueprints before him blurred into meaningless lines. Finally, as the office emptied for the night, he made a decision. Sarah, he called to his assistant. Cancel my meetings for the next few days. Something's come up. The drive to Austin was long and silent. Grant's mind raced with memories the good times with Janelle before it all went wrong. The life they'd built together. The family he'd thought he had. As he crossed the city limits, a familiar ache settled in his chest. This place, once home, now felt alien. Hostile even. Grant checked into a hotel, avoiding the old neighborhood. He wasn't ready to face those ghosts just yet. Instead, he found himself driving to the police station. Detective Rodriguez looked up in surprise as Grant entered his office. Mr. Holloway? I didn't expect to see you here. Grant sat heavily in the chair across from him. I need to know what happened to Janelle. Rodriguez sighed, rubbing his temples. Mr. Holloway, I understand this is difficult, but I can't discuss an ongoing investigation. Please, Grant insisted. I know we were estranged, but she was my wife for 20 years. I need to understand. The detective studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but this stays between us, understood. At Grant's nod, he continued. It wasn't an overdose. Janelle was murdered, staged to look like an OD, but Army found signs of struggle. Grant felt the blood drain from his face. Murdered? By who? We're still investigating. But Rodriguez hesitated. Your daughter, Mara. We can't locate her. She's not a suspect, but we need to talk to her. You're sure you haven't had any contact? The lie came easier this time. No, none. As Grant left the station, his mind was in turmoil. Janelle murdered. Mara missing. What had they gotten themselves into? He found himself driving aimlessly, lost in thought. Without realizing it, he'd ended up in his old neighborhood. His house loomed before him, dark and silent. Grant parked across the street, staring at the place that had once been his home. The lawn was overgrown, the paint peeling. It looked abandoned. A movement in an upstairs window caught his eye. A shadow, quickly disappearing. Grant's heart raced. Could it be? Before he could think better of it, Grant was out of the car and across the street. He tried the front door locked, but he remembered the loose board on the back porch, where they'd always hidden a spare key. The key was still there. Grant entered the house silently, years of memories assaulting him with every step. The living room, where he'd overheard that fateful conversation. The kitchen, where they'd shared countless family meals. A creak from upstairs made him freeze. Someone was definitely here. Grant climbed the stairs slowly, his heart pounding. The noise had come from Mara's old room. He approached cautiously, pushing the door open. There, huddled in the corner, was Mara. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear and recognition. Dad, she whispered. Grant stood in the doorway, 1,000 emotions warring within him. Anger at her betrayal, concern for her obvious distress, and underneath it all, a stubborn, lingering love he couldn't quite extinguish. Mara, he said, his voice rough. What have you done? The tension in Mara's old bedroom was palpable. Grant stood in the doorway, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, while Mara huddled in the corner, fear and desperation etched on her features. Dad, please, Mara whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't kill Mom. You have to believe me. Grant's jaw clenched. Then explain, Mara. Explain why your mother is dead and you're hiding out in our abandoned house. Mara took a shaky breath. It was Owen. He got involved with some dangerous people. Loan sharks, I think. When he couldn't pay, they came after us. And your mother? Grant pressed, his voice hard. Tears spilled down Mara's cheeks. She tried to protect me, told me to run while she dealt with them. I was so scared, I left her. Grant's fists clenched at his sides. You left her to die? No, Mara cried. I didn't know they would. I thought she could handle it. She always did before. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Grant's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of the life he'd left behind. Before, he asked, his voice dangerously low. How long has this been going on, Mara? Mara's shoulders slumped. Years. Ever since you left. Owen. He wasn't what Mom thought he was. He used her, used us, but she was too proud to admit it, too scared to leave. Grant felt a familiar anger rising in his chest. And you? Were you too scared to tell the truth? To reach out for help? I tried. Mara shot back, a spark of defiance in her eyes. I came to you, remember? But you turned me away. The accusation stung, but Grant refused to let it show. You came asking for money, not help. There's a difference. A heavy silence fell between them. Grant looked around the room, taking in the faded posters, the dusty trophies. Reminders of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Finally, he spoke. We need to go to the police. Tell them what you know about Owen, about the people after him. Mara's eyes widened in panic. No, Dad, you don't understand. These people, they're dangerous. If they find out I talked, they're going to find you anyway, Grant countered. At least this way, you'll have protection. Mara shook her head vehemently. I can't. I won't. Grant's patience, already thin, snapped. Damn it, Mara. Your mother is dead. You're a suspect in her murder. This isn't a game. You think I don't know that? Mara screamed, tears streaming down her face. You think I wanted any of this? I wanted, what? Grant demanded. What did you want, Mara? I wanted my dad back. The words erupted from her like a volcano, raw and painful. I wanted the man who used to tuck me in at night, who taught me how to ride a bike, who made me feel safe. Where did he go, Dad? Where did you go? The accusation hit Grant like a physical blow. For a moment, he saw not the young woman before him, but the little girl he'd once adored. The little girl he'd left behind. But the moment passed, and reality reasserted itself. Grant's expression hardened. That man died the night he learned his family had betrayed him. You made your choice, Mara. Now you have to live with the consequences. Mara's face crumpled. So that's it? You're just going to turn me in? Grant moved to the door. I'm going to do what I should have done 5 years ago. I'm going to make this right. As he reached for his phone to call Detective Rodriguez, a noise from downstairs made them both freeze. Hello, a male voice called. Mara, are you here? Mara's face drained of color. Oh God, she whispered. It's Owen. Grant's mind raced. Owen here? The man who'd helped destroy his family, who'd apparently gotten Janelle killed. A cold fury settled over him. Stay here, he ordered Mara. Don't make a sound. Before she could protest, Grant slipped out of the room and down the stairs. In the dim light of the living room stood Owen, older and more haggard than Grant remembered, but unmistakable. Owen turned at the sound of Grant's approach, his eyes widening in shock. Grant? What the hell are you doing here? Grant's voice was ice. I could ask you the same thing, Owen. Come to finish what you started? Owen's surprise gave way to a nervous laugh. Come on, Grant. Ancient history, right? Water under the bridge. I'm just looking for Mara. Have you seen her? Cut the act, Grant snarled. I know what you've done. The people you've gotten involved with. Janelle is dead because of you. Owen's facade cracked. That wasn't my fault. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I just needed more time, more money, more lies. Grant cut him off. It's always been lies with you, hasn't it? Using people, discarding them when they're no longer useful. Owen's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. Look, Grant, we can work this out. I've got a plan. With your help, we could... No, the word fell like a hammer blow. No more plans. No more schemes. It ends here, Owen. Owen's desperation turned to anger. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so much better than me? At least I stayed. At least I tried to take care of them after you ran away. Grant's control snapped. With a roar of rage, he lunged at Owen. They crashed into the coffee table, sending old magazines and dust flying. Grant's fist connected with Owen's jaw, years of pent-up fury behind the blow. Owen fought back, clawing and kicking. They grappled across the floor, knocking over lamps and appending furniture. The house, once a home filled with laughter and love, now echoed with the sounds of their struggle. In the midst of the chaos, neither man noticed Mara descending the stairs. She stood frozen, watching the two men who had shaped her life locked in bitter combat. "Stop," she screamed. "Both of you, just stop." Her cry startled them both. Grant looked up, his grip on Owen's collar loosening. It was all the opening Owen needed. He shoved Grant away and bolted for the door. Grant started to give chase, but Mara's voice stopped him. "Dad, please. Let him go." He turned to her, chest heaving. "Mara, he's responsible for your mother's death. He needs to face justice." Mara's eyes were sad but resolute. "And he will, but not like this. Not with more violence." For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other. Then, slowly, Grant nodded. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Detective Rodriguez? It's Grant Holloway. I think I have some information you'll want to hear." The next few hours passed in a blur. Police swarmed the old house, taking statements and collecting evidence. Grant watched as Mara was led away in handcuffs, her eyes meeting his one last time before she was placed in a squad car. As the chaos subsided, Detective Rodriguez approached Grant. "Mr. Holloway, I have to say, this is one hell of a story. You're sure you had no prior knowledge of any of this?" Grant met the detective's gaze steadily. "None. I left that life behind years ago." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Well, your daughter's testimony should be enough to bring in Owen and his associates. As for her involvement, that'll be for the courts to decide." Grant felt a weight settle on his shoulders. "What happens now?" "Now?" Rodriguez sighed. "Now we start building a case. It's going to be a long process, Mr. Holloway. I hope you're prepared for that." Grant looked around the house one last time. The home he'd built, the life he'd left behind. It all felt like a distant dream now. "I'm prepared, Detective. Whatever it takes to see justice done." As dawn broke over Austin, Grant stood on the porch of his old home. The police had finally cleared out, leaving him alone with his thoughts. He pulled out his phone, dialing a familiar number. "Sarah? It's Grant. I need you to cancel my meetings for the next few weeks. Something's come up." "No, everything's not okay. But it will be." Ending the call, Grant took a deep breath. He had a long road ahead. Trials, testimonies, facing the ghosts of his past. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose. He wouldn't let Janelle's death be in vain. He wouldn't abandon Mara, no matter how much she'd hurt him. And he would make damn sure Owen and his cronies paid for what they'd done. As he walked to his car, Grant's resolve hardened. He wasn't the man he used to be, the naive husband and doting father. Life had forged him into something harder, colder. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was still room for growth, for change. He wouldn't forgive. He couldn't forget. But he could fight. Fight for justice. Fight for closure. Fight for a future unburdened by the weight of betrayal. Grant Holloway started his car, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The past was written, but the future? That was still his to shape. Epilogue. 1 year later, Grant stood at the podium, cameras flashing before him. The newly opened Grant Holloway Foundation for Victims of Financial Fraud gleamed behind him, a testament to his determination to make something positive out of the tragedy that had befallen his family. Today, he began, his voice strong and clear. "We take a stand against those who would prey on the vulnerable, who would use deceit and manipulation to destroy lives." In the audience, he spotted familiar faces. Detective Rodriguez, nodding approvingly. Sarah, his loyal assistant, beaming with pride. And in the back, escorted by a prison guard, Mara. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken understanding passing between them. This foundation, Grant continued, is dedicated to helping those who have been victimized by financial predators. We will provide support, resources, and a path forward for those who feel they have nowhere else to turn. As he spoke, Grant felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. He would never forget the pain of betrayal, the years of anger and bitterness. But he had found a way to channel that pain into something meaningful, something that could help others avoid the fate that had befallen his family. To those who think they can exploit others without consequence, he concluded, his voice ringing with conviction, know this. We are watching. We are fighting. And we will not rest until justice is served. The applause was thunderous. As Grant stepped away from the podium, he allowed himself a small smile. He had survived the storm, emerged stronger, more focused. The man who had fled Austin in the dead of night, broken and betrayed, was gone. In his place stood Grant Holloway, a man forged by adversity, tempered by pain, and driven by an unwavering commitment to justice. He would never forget, never truly forgive. But he would move forward, one step at a time, writing a new chapter in a life that had once seemed shattered beyond repair. The future stretched out before him, uncertain but full of possibility. And for the first time in years, Grant was ready to face it head-on.